And I repeat, it's not that he believes this, it's that he writes what that investor class wants to hear, because then it gives it an air of legitimacy. But this man has been fundamentally wrong about everything that he's ever written.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
I had to do a list of the 10 worst newspaper columnists that have existed during my lifetime. I think I have no doubt who would be number one, and that would be Thomas L. Friedman of the New York Times. Now, there was a moment in history when Thomas Friedman was still pretty respected around, intellectual circles. Now I don't think he is. He's a bit of a farce, and people have kind of realized over time that this man just really inhabits a separate universe than the rest of humanity. But I want to just show his last article, which he published a few days ago regarding the COP26 climate summit, because this is pretty much the living example of everything that's wrong with this man and his worldview, and why I have no idea why he has such an important standing in a newspaper like the New York Times. So here is his absolute banger of an article called Want to Save the Earth? We Need a Lot More Elon Musks. So I'll just leave you a second to realize how ridiculous this is. I'm going to read part of it. I obviously don't want to bore you reading the whole thing, but he starts with laying out some contradictions about the climate debate, which I think are kind of, broadly speaking, uh, yeah, pretty accurate. But here's when it starts to get into fantasy land. So he's talking about these ideas, and he says this is not serious. Not when you're talking about reversing all the ways that we have destabilized Earth's systems, from ice caps and ocean currents to coral reefs and tropical forests to the density of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is pretend. Oh, he must be, pro climate action. But then here's his real motivation. Serious was how we responded to COVID-19 when it really did feel like the world economy was ending. We fought back with the only tools we have that are as big and powerful as Mother Nature: Father Profit and new tech. Holy shit. Father Profit apparently is as big and powerful as Mother Nature. In other words, a social economic construct that we have created and that has existed only for, at least in its current version of capitalism, which has existed really only for like the last 200, 250 years, uh, which we as a species has the power to control. We have that power. Like any country in the world can decide tomorrow we're not capitalist anymore. They can do that. Any country in the world could nationalize every single business. They can do that. I'm not saying they should do that. I'm just saying they could. Now, seems to me, Father Prophet was as powerful as Mother Nature. We would not have that power to do that, right? And even if we're not talking about, going that far as, getting rid of capitalism and nationalizing everything, we can still do things that affect profit. So we could regulate certain industries that we think are too profitable and that profit creates negative externalities on the planet. We could do that. Again, we could do that tomorrow, today even. So is Father Prophet really as powerful as Mother Nature? I don't think it is, but that is the Friedman logic. That is this. Friedman has always wanted to present capitalism and globalization as forces so powerful that we can't do anything about them. That is the gist you get when he described globalization in his early books, like the world is flat, like this unseen force that dominates our lives and that we are powerless against. Well, we are powerless as individuals against it, but we are not powerful. We're not powerless as, a collective of human beings. This collective being in the form of governments or international agencies or things like that. We are not powerless against capitalism. We are not powerless against globalization. These are all economic constructs. We have invented them and we can destroy them. But yeah, not for Friedman. We combined innovative biotech firms like Pfizer BioNTech, Moderna, and some small startups with today's massive computing power and a giant market demand signal. A giant market demand signal. Yeah, people fucking dropping dead all around the world. That's a great market signal for, that is actually what would get us to do, any action against climate change. If people started dropping dead from heat or whatever, which they are doing to some extent already. But this is not a market demand, okay? This is not. What did we get? In little over a year after first being locked down by the virus, I had an effective mRNA vaccine against COVID-19 in my body, followed by a booster. It was an amazing feat of biotechnology and computerized logistics to develop and deliver vaccines, and I hope the scientists, employees, and shareholders of those vaccine innovators make boatloads of money, because it will incentivize others to apply a similar formula to stem climate change. Okay, Thomas. I'm sure your friends call you Tom. Guess who paid for all this? Guess who funded vaccine development? Was it these shareholders? No, it was the state. And there were two ways that the state financed this. They either financed it directly through, direct investment in the forms of things like Operation Warp Speed in the US. But there was another way that they funded it because, for example, Pfizer did not accept money from Operation Warp Speed. Why? Well, because they already got billions in pre-orders from the US government, which that also counts as funding. So let's see what happened. Governments funded these companies. Oh, BioNTech got a $500,000, something like 1,000 euro investment from the German government. So, and then Oxford University, which really was the one that developed the AstraZeneca vaccine. AstraZeneca was involved only in producing and distributing it, but the real development came from Oxford. What are universities private companies? They have to behave like them, but they're not. So yeah. So we have governments, states, which invested in vaccines. And then, who bought the vaccines? Other states. Almost every single other, private companies have not been buying up COVID vaccines. It's been states who have then organized themselves in various ways. No country has had the same method of distribution and purchase, but they've organized it. They've done it. It's been state led. So where was the who's going to profit from this? Of course, these companies are going to profit from this, because every time the state invests in something that is then marketable, they never reap the shares. That's why I've always argued every single state investment in a private firm should be in the form of equity, because then the state would get back some of those profits. Anyway, yeah. Also, why was this done so quickly? Well, some of the technology was already had already existed, and the fact is, when you have a major pandemic, this is something that everyone who claims that the vaccine was experimental, well, how did they produce it in like 1 year when vaccines take like 5 or 10 years, whatever? Dude, we have millions of people catching the virus. It is incredibly easy to run trials on a vaccine from a disease where you have no shortage of people catching it. That is the main difference between why it took so little to develop this vaccine versus vaccines that you don't have so many people catching it, that you can quickly run trials to see if they work. So that's really the gist of it. So yeah, I think markets really didn't have that big a role as Friedman says they do. Uh, so yeah, I have nothing against Glasgow. I admire those leaders who are trying to inspire the world to cut CO2 emissions, preserve biodiversity, and hold each other to account. But we will not decarbonize the global economy with a lowest common denominator action plan of 195 countries. Not possible. So it's up to business, benevolent business. Um, Basically, again, it's the people causing, it's the institutions causing this problem are, according to Friedman, the ones who are gonna get us out of it. Despite the fact that obviously saving the planet runs contrary to the motives of Father Prophet. The reality is that Father Prophet, he puts Father Prophet and Mother Nature as kind of working together. No, in fact, Father Prophet is the abusive fucking father that beats up Mother Nature every day when he gets home from work. That's more close to the reality. We will get there only when Father Prophet and risk-taking entrepreneurs produce transformative technologies that enable ordinary people to have extraordinary impacts on our climate without sacrificing much, just by being consumers of these new technologies. In short, we need a few more Greta Thunbergs. I'm sure he would really rather there not be any Greta Thunberg, and a lot more Elon Musks. That is, more risk-taking innovators converting basic science into tools yet to be managed to protect the planet for a generation yet to be born. A friendly reminder that Elon Musk has received billions, I mean billions, in government subsidies, and he would not have made it to space. By the way, he hasn't made it to space. He's made it to like the edge of space, but he hasn't actually been to space. With technology that was originally developed by NASA, a public agency. Anyway, he goes on to describe, two companies that are doing great things, like a environmental satellite company called Planet. And then he talks about Helion Energy, which is trying to develop fusion power. And I mean, he quotes that saying that is very common, um, that fusion power is always 20 years away, which I find really funny, but it's kind of true. And I there's no reason to think why right now is any different. And I mean, just look at I mean, how stupid is he that he doesn't even contextualize the numbers? So on November 5th, in the midst of Glasgow, Helion, across the Atlantic in Redmond, announced that it raised 500 million in new financing. You realize how little 500 million is? You realize like Jeff Bezos spent like 5.5 billion on his little space rocket. That's it. Compare that with 500. Like, do you realize the magnitude of spending an investment that is going into complete, utter, useless shit? 500 million is the cost of three or four apartments in one of those New York, Manhattan pencil apartments for the ultra wealthy. That's it. So think about priorities. Anyway, yeah, we can get out of it in part by accelerating the best of American capitalism. We need to re-energize our innovation ecosystem to where government funds basic research that pushes the boundaries of physics, chemistry, and biology, and then combines that innovation with immigration policies that amass the world's best pool of engineering talent, and then unleashes that talent propelled by risk takers to invent new clean technologies to slow global warming at the warp speed and scale we need. That is great because I bet you all those talented immigrants who come to the US to do PhDs in physics will be snatched up by hedge funds, and the rest will work in private equity. I don't know. But yeah, this guy is just what a fucking loser, honestly. This guy is such. My problem with Thomas Friedman is that he is basically a mouthpiece for plutocrats. That's what he is. He has no other purpose in life other than being a mouthpiece for plutocrats. And you can get a sense of it from his writing. And what's worse is he has this kind of arrogance that only he sees like beyond what people are, what little people are arguing. Only he's the only one that can see the big picture. Um, and it's a really stupid big picture, let's be honest. And you get a sense of this from his entire career. And I'm just gonna. I want this video to end with some humor. So I want to show you some of his greatest hits throughout his lifetime, just in case there is any semblance of a doubt that this man isn't, a complete waste of time. So he started off. I think the first time that I remember his name was from this book, which I think my mother had. Um, and apparently he won a couple of Pulitzer prizes for his reporting in Beirut and Jerusalem. So then he wrote this book. Now, this is really funny because everything that happened to every element of his style of writing for the rest of his career could be picked up in this book. And there was a very scathing review from Edward Said. Now, if Edward Said tells you you know fuck all about the Middle East, then you should take it at heart. Okay, and here's what he says. Friedman presents himself as more than a reporter, his book as more than a personal chronicle. No one watching television these days has not seen Friedman, quote, the expert on all the right programs, the detached, impartial, authoritative observer who is a sizable cut above the smaller scale partisans who are so transparently militant and therefore less credible. This is basically like the epitome of the mindset of the liberal centrist. I am going to speak with authority. I am the rational one. All these other people are biased and partisan, but not me. In fact, I do think that like Thomas Friedman is like the quintessential liberal centrist. From Beirut to Jerusalem is the marketing strategy by means of which a young reporter consciously elevates himself to the rank of foreign policy sage, therefore there to reap rewards and, alas, to recycle the illusions of American power and visionless realism. Yeah, it's not the comic philistinism of Friedman's ideas that I find so remarkably jejune, or his sassy and unbeguiling manner, or his grating indifference to values and principles by which, perhaps misguidedly, Arabs and Jews have believed themselves to be informed. It is rather the special combination of disarming incoherence and unlearned egoism that gives him his cockily alarming plausibility, qualities that may explain the book's quite startling commercial success. Yeah. Not only is there scarcely a reference in From Beirut to Jerusalem to the latest work on Arab history and society, but Friedman is also quite innocent about the latest in Israeli scholarship that has analyzed the origins of the Palestinian refugee problem or the birth of Israel, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. So I would not want to write a book on a topic where a renowned world expert on that topic writes this about me. But let's go see some of his other greatest hits. This is one of his latest ones as well. Would Russia or China help us if we were invaded by space aliens? I'm sorry. This is not serious. This is not serious journalism. Uh, Here's another banger. This was one of his worst bangers. So basically, if you ever want to have the absolute worst opinion of any new global leader, look to Thomas Friedman. Thomas Friedman always elevates pro-Western, pro-capitalist reformers in these horrible authoritarian states as, like ushering in a new era. So Saudi Arabia's Arab Spring at last. The Crown Prince has big plans for his society. Yeah, the most significant reform process underway anywhere in the Middle East today is Saudi Arabia. Yes, you read that right. Though I came here at the start of Saudi winter, I found the country going through its own Arab Spring, Saudi style. Yeah. This one is led from the top down by the country's 32-year-old Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Only a fool would predict its success, but only a fool would not root for it. Well, he proved himself to be a fool. And, you write this and a couple of, was it months? November 2017, probably like a couple of months before he has journalists chopped up in a foreign embassy. That's the reformist. Now, this one also is dear to my heart because it's about Mexico. And I came across this article at a time when I was covering Mexico for the Economist Intelligence Unit, and I was reading all the hype that was being given to the government of Enrique Peña Nieto, which had at this point in time had just come to power. And he also promised big reforms. He wanted to liberalize the energy industry, things like that. And obviously, that had Westerners salivating. Investors were just looking at Mexico like a vulture looking at, like that picture of a vulture looking at a starving baby. That's exactly how the global investor class was looking at Mexico at the time. And you had no shortage of articles like this, including, I should add, from The Economist itself, the magazine. Thankfully, we didn't have to follow the magazine line because fuck that. No way I was going to continue laughing, reaping praise on a guy that I knew from a start, being Mexican, that this guy was a fucking idiot and a fraud. But this is Friedman's take. If in India people ask you about China, and in China people ask you about India, which country will become the more dominant economic power in the 21st century? I now have the answer: Mexico. Jesus fucking Christ. But all of this, his entire view on the country was based on the fact that he visited an industrial innovation center in Monterrey. That's it. No more analysis. He does not need to learn history. He does not need to learn economics. He does not learn to, know things about the national psyche of how power works in the country. No, nothing. All this jackass had to do was go to a friggin' innovation plant in one city, in one country, and then decide that that country was going to be the next world economic power. And I repeat, it's not that he believes this. It's that he writes what that investor class wants to hear. Because then it gives it an air of legitimacy. But this man has been fundamentally wrong about everything that he's ever written. Here's his take on Iraq, which he was, unsurprisingly, in favor of. The real reason for this war, which was never stated, was that after 9/11, America needed to hit someone in the Arab Muslim world because a terrorist bubble had built up there. A bubble that posed a real threat to the open societies of the West and needed to be punctured. So, yeah, that is why that's what it was about. Not because there was actually any terrorism, because as we know now, there was no Al Qaeda in Iraq at the time. In fact, Iraq ended up becoming a festering sore of terrorism after the invasion, not before it. But of course, he has to peddle this excuse. Yeah, and I mean the the title of the article says it all. Why would we invade Iraq? Well, because we could. Yeah. Now, I repeat, this man is a mouthpiece for the plutocracy, and he's generously paid for those efforts, because no one who is that terrible a journalist and even more terrible as a forecaster of global events could earn the amount of money that he has earned. So his net worth apparently is 25 million. 25 friggin' million. Ask yourself how many struggling staff writers at the New York Times have 25 million. Struggling and non-unionized, because I should add the New York Times loves union busting. Money was never the motivating factor for Thomas Friedman, which explains why Friedman still works as a columnist for the New York Times. Dude, that's not your main source of income, okay? But he still gets 300,000 a year. How many staff writers, like much more qualified journalists, could be paid with those 300,000? But no, it's just a name. It vindicates these ideas. It is the message that the New York Times gives to that global investor class that that they're on their side because they have Thomas Friedman writing for them. In addition to the regular salary, he also earns $40,000 per speaking engagement. Why the fuck would anyone want to hear what he has to say? Oh, unless you need to justify what you're doing. Yeah. Friedman and his family live a flashy lifestyle and do not complete justice to her net worth. Because his wife is also filthy rich. He built a large mansion-like house, 11,400 square foot house valued at 9.3 million. That is what sucking up to the plutocracy gets you. That's why it's so lucrative. That's why all these people do this grift. Friedman's wife, Anne, is a teacher and native of Marshalltown, Iowa, a graduate of Stanford University and London School of Economics. Oh, we are my alma mater. She is the daughter of real estate developer Matthew Bucksbaum, whom, yeah. Well, there you go. Married into money, keeps making money. His life just basically revolves around making money by sucking up to the plutocratic class. That is Thomas Friedman for you. So, on that note, there's so many bad journalists that I really, just to talk about one would be a disservice to the state of American journalism. But this guy definitely takes the cake. I still think he is the worst columnist that I have read in my lifetime. And yeah, like I said, the only saving grace is that very few people take him seriously now. Which begs the question, why on earth is he still being paid? Just retire, dude. Just retire. Please. Anyway, on that note, if you like this video, please like, please share, please subscribe. Most importantly, don't read Thomas Friedman unless you're looking for something to laugh at. See you next time.